am 26 years old. My life was supposed to be simple. My father passed away when I was 20, and he left me the family home. It was a generous, loving act. He wanted to make sure I would always have a place of my own. The deed was in my name, free and clear. My mother, Sarah, was devastated by his passing. A few years later, she met Mark. He was charming and attentive, and he made her smile again. I was happy for her. I wanted her to be happy. They got married. I offered to let them live with me in the house my father left me. It felt like the right thing to do. My mother shouldn't have to worry about finding a new place. The arrangement was clear. They would live there rent-free. I would continue to pay the property taxes and handle any major repairs using a small fund my dad had also set aside for that purpose. It was my house, but it was our home. At least, that's what I thought. Mark settled in quickly. Too quickly. He started talking about the house's potential. He would walk through the rooms, tapping on walls. He made comments about how much value we were sitting on. A cold feeling would crawl up my spine whenever he said that. It was my father's home. It wasn't an investment opportunity. It was a place filled with memories, a place of safety. Mark didn't see that. He only saw dollar signs. I tried to ignore my feelings. I told myself I was being overly sensitive. I was protective of my dad's memory. I didn't want to cause problems with my mom. So I stayed quiet. I watched, and I waited. I just didn't know what I was waiting for. The waiting ended on a Tuesday. I came home from work and checked the mail, just like any other day. Bills, junk mail, a magazine. And then I saw it. A thick envelope made of stiff, important-looking paper. It was from a bank I didn't recognize. It was addressed to me, Eleanor Vance. I tore it open right there at the kitchen counter. My hands started to shake as I read the first line. Notice of intent to foreclose. The words didn't make sense. Foreclose? On my house? A house that was fully paid for? I read on, my heart pounding against my ribs. The letter stated that a home equity line of credit for $200,000 had been taken out against the property. The payments were more than 90 days delinquent. The bank was exercising its right to seize the asset. My home. My father's home. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, the letter trembling in my hand. $200,000. I had never taken out a loan in my life. I had never signed any papers. I had never even heard of this bank. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was a mistake. It had to be a mistake. But deep down, in a cold, dark place inside me, I knew it wasn't. This had Mark's fingerprints all over it. He had finally unlocked the house's potential. And in doing so, he had just destroyed my world. My first coherent thought was to find my mother. She was in the living room watching a game show on television. The cheerful music and applause felt like a cruel joke. I walked in, holding the letter out in front of me like a shield. My face must have been pale because her smile faded the moment she saw me. Ellie, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. I think I have, I whispered. My voice was hoarse. I couldn't seem to get enough air into my lungs. I handed her the letter. What is this? She took it, her brow furrowed in confusion. She put on her reading glasses and her eyes scanned the page. I watched her expression change from curiosity to confusion, and then to utter disbelief. For close? What does this mean? It's a mistake, right? Is it, Mom? I asked. My voice was harder now. It says there's a $200,000 loan on this house, a loan that I supposedly signed for. Did you know anything about this? No, of course not, she cried, her eyes wide with panic. Ellie, you know I wouldn't. This has to be some kind of terrible error. Where is Mark? I asked. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. He's on a business trip, she said, her voice wavering. He left yesterday. He'll be back on Friday. Convenient. He was always on a business trip. I sank onto the sofa, the strength gone from my legs. The game show blared on, a laugh track erupting from the television. My mother finally seemed to notice it and fumbled for the remote, plunging the room into silence. We sat there, the quiet pressing in on us. The letter lay on the coffee table between us, a white rectangle of doom. "I'm going to call the bank," I said, finally breaking the silence. I needed answers. I needed to hear it from them. I found the phone number on the letterhead and dialed. My hand was still shaking so badly I had to punch the numbers in twice. A polite, automated voice answered, and I navigated the menu until I was connected to a human being. I explained who I was and why I was calling. I tried to keep my voice steady. Professional. The man on the other end of the line was named Mr. Harrison. He was patient. He pulled up my file. "Yes, Ms. Vance, I see the account here. It's a home equity line of credit for $200,000 opened in March of last year." "I never opened that account," I said, my voice cracking. "I never signed any documents." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. "Well, Ms. Vance, our records show the loan documents were signed by you. We have a copy of your signature on file." "It's not my signature," I insisted. "It has to be a forgery." "I understand this is upsetting," Mr. Harrison said, his tone shifting to one of practiced sympathy. "Fraud is a serious matter. We can launch an investigation, but the loan is tied to the property. The delinquency is real. The foreclosure process has been initiated." The word foreclosure hit me again, like a physical blow. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice small. "You would need to file a police report for identity theft and forgery," he explained. "And you would likely need to hire an attorney. In the meantime, the payments are still due." I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. Forgery, identity theft, attorney, police. These were words from television shows, not from my life. My mother was watching me, her face a mask of fear and worry. "They said the signature is on file," I told her, my voice flat. "They think I signed it." "But you didn't," she whispered. "No, I didn't." I looked at her, a terrible suspicion blooming in my chest. She was so trusting, so naive when it came to Mark. He handled all their finances. He brought her papers to sign all the time. "Mom," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "I need you to think really, really hard. Has Mark ever asked you to sign any papers related to the house? Maybe something he called a refinancing or home improvement document?" Her face crumpled. The tears she had been holding back finally began to fall. She nodded, unable to speak at first. She took a shuddering breath. "Yes," she choked out. "About a year ago. He said we were getting a better rate on something, to lower our bills. He said it was just standard paperwork." My blood ran cold. "Did you read what you were signing?" She shook her head, sobbing openly now. "No, he was in such a hurry. He said a courier was waiting outside. He just pointed to the lines and told me where to sign. I trusted him, Ellie. He's my husband. I trusted him." There it was, the missing piece. Mark hadn't just forged my name. He had used my mother. He had manipulated her love and trust to make her an unwitting accomplice to his crime. He had probably told her it was something mundane, something that would benefit them both. And she, wanting to believe in the man she married, had signed her name without a second thought. She had helped him steal my inheritance. She had helped him put a ticking time bomb under our home. And now, it was about to explode. The betrayal was so complete, so monstrous, it was hard to comprehend. He hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen our security, our peace, and my mother's dignity. A strange calm settled over me. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, hard anger. This wasn't just a financial problem anymore. This was a war, and I had just found my enemy. The next morning, I woke up with a singular purpose. The shock had worn off, leaving behind a steely resolve. I was not going to lose my father's house. I was not going to let Mark get away with this. I told my mother I was going to the bank. She offered to come with me, her eyes red and swollen from a sleepless night, but I told her to stay home. I needed to do this alone. I needed to see the evidence for myself without her emotional distress clouding the situation. Walking into the bank felt surreal. It was an imposing building of glass and steel, cold and impersonal. I asked to speak with Mr. Harrison from the fraud department. After a short wait, I was led into a small, windowless office. Mr. Harrison was a middle-aged man with a tired but kind face. He shook my hand and offered me a seat. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Vance," he said. "I've pulled the file." "I want to see the loan application," I said, my voice steady. "I want to see the signatures." He nodded and slid a thick folder across the desk. He opened it to a page marked Signature Authorization. And there it was. My name, Eleanor Vance, written in a looping, unfamiliar script. It was a poor imitation. The E was too round, the V too sharp. Anyone who had ever seen my real signature would know it was a fake. It was almost insulting in its clumsiness. Then my eyes moved to the line below. Spousal consent, occupant acknowledgement. And there, in her familiar, slightly shaky handwriting, was my mother's name, Sarah Miller. It looked genuine. My stomach clenched. Seeing it there, in black and white, made her tearful confession from the night before brutally real. "This is not my signature," I said, pointing to the forgery. "This one," I gestured to my mother's name, "looks like hers." But she was told she was signing something completely different. Mr. Harrison sighed. "This is what we call sophisticated fraud, Ms. Vance. It often involves a party known to the victim, a family member, a spouse. It makes it much more complicated." "What about the money?" I asked. "The $200,000. Where did it go?" "I can't give you the specific account number without a subpoena," he said, his voice laced with regret. "Bank privacy laws are very strict. However, I can confirm for you that the full amount was disbursed via a single wire transfer on March 15th of last year." He turned a page in the file. It was a redacted copy of the wire transfer confirmation. Most of the information was blacked out, but two crucial details were visible: the date and the name of the receiving bank, Apex Digital Trust. I had never heard of it. "An online bank," Mr. Harrison offered. "They are notoriously difficult to deal with. They have no physical branches." Of course, Mark was covering his tracks. He was smart, but I was determined. I asked for copies of everything: the application, the signature page, the wire transfer confirmation. Mr. Harrison obliged, his sympathy seeming genuine. As I stood to leave, he looked at me with a serious expression. "Ms. Vance," he said, "you told me on the phone that your stepfather handles your mother's finances." "Yes," I confirmed. "I strongly advise you to contact a lawyer," he said again, "and the police. Do not try to handle this on your own." I walked out of the bank with a large envelope of documents under my arm. The evidence. It felt both heavy and empowering. The forgery was obvious. My mother's unwitting participation was clear. The money trail had a starting point. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. As soon as I got back to my car, I pulled out my phone. There was only one person I could think of to call: David Carter. He had been my father's best friend since they were kids. He was a retired corporate lawyer, sharp as a tack and fiercely loyal. He had always treated me like a niece. And he had never, ever liked Mark. He answered on the second ring. "Ellie, what a surprise. How are you?" "David, I'm in trouble," I said, and the dam broke. The composure I had maintained all morning crumbled, and I told him everything. The foreclosure notice, the forged signature, my mother's confession, the trip to the bank. I spoke in a rush, the words tumbling over each other. He listened patiently, not interrupting once. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost feel his anger simmering through the phone. "That son of a bitch," he finally said, his voice a low growl. I knew he was no good from the day Sarah introduced him. I knew it. I don't know what to do, David, I whispered. The bank said to call the police, but don't talk to them yet. He cut me off. And stop talking to the bank. Don't say another word to them. And for God's sake, don't let your mother talk to Mark if he calls. This is a crime scene now, Ellie. Your house is a crime scene. You are the victim of a major felony. His words were harsh, but they were also clarifying. He was taking this seriously. What's our first move? I asked, already thinking of him as part of my team. Our first move is you drive over to my house right now, he said. Bring that envelope of papers from the bank. We're going to scan every single page. Then we're going to map out a plan. He thinks he's smart, but he's just a common thief. And we are going to burn him to the ground. Hearing the conviction in his voice was like a shot of adrenaline. For the first time since I opened that letter, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. I had an ally, and he was just as angry as I was. I drove to David's house, a sprawling but comfortable place in a leafy suburb. He greeted me at the door with a bear hug. He was a big man, with a shock of white hair and kind, intelligent eyes that were currently blazing with fury on my behalf. His wife, Maria, gave me a glass of iced tea and a plate of cookies, treating me with a gentle kindness that almost made me cry. We sat at his large dining room table, which he had clearly converted into a temporary war room. He had legal pads, pens, and a scanner ready to go. I handed him the envelope from the bank, and he methodically took out each page, examining it under a bright lamp. The forgery is a joke, he muttered, looking at my supposed signature. A first-year law student could pick this apart. Good. That's very good for us. He looked at my mother's signature. This is the complication. Mark will try to use this. He'll claim she was in on it. She wasn't, I said fiercely. She was tricked. I know that, and you know that, David said, looking up at me. But we have to be able to prove it. We need to establish a pattern of deception and control. Did he manage all of her money? Did he isolate her from friends or family? I thought about it. He handles everything financial. The bills, their joint bank account, everything. He always made her feel like she was bad with numbers. He didn't isolate her from me, obviously, but he did make little comments about her sister, my Aunt Carol. He'd say Carol was too nosy or too judgmental. Classic manipulator, David grunted, making a note on his legal pad. Isolate the target, gain their trust, create dependency. He's running a textbook con. He pointed to the redacted wire transfer form. Apex Digital Trust. Never heard of them. That's where the money went. Our next step is to find out who owns that account. The bank said they couldn't tell me, I said. They won't tell you, he corrected. But there are ways. It's going to cost some money, but I have a friend, a private investigator. She's the best there is at following digital breadcrumbs. Her name is Chloe. Is that something you're willing to do? Yes, I said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Good. He wrote down another note. Now, for the hard part. Mark is coming home on Friday. He is going to walk into that house expecting your mother to be on his side. He's going to have a story prepared. A lie. You cannot, under any circumstances, let him know that you have seen a lawyer or that you have copies of these documents. You're scared. You are confused. You are waiting for him to come home and fix this terrible mistake. Do you understand? I have to pretend I don't know? I asked, the idea churning in my stomach. Yes, David said firmly. We need him to feel confident. We need him to dig his own grave. Let him spin his lies. Let him think he's in control. The more he lies, the more rope he gives us to hang him with. When he gets home, you confront him. But you do it from a position of weakness, not strength. You show him the foreclosure notice and you ask him what it is. You cry. You let him reassure you. You play the part of the hysterical daughter. Can you do that? I thought about Mark's smug face, his condescending tone. The thought of playing the victim for him made my skin crawl. But I saw the strategic wisdom in David's plan. I nodded. I can do it. This is going to be difficult, Ellie, David said, his voice softening. He's going to try to manipulate you and your mother. He's going to turn you against each other. You have to be strong. I am strong, I said. And for the first time, I truly believed it. He underestimated me. He underestimated my father. He's not going to win. David smiled, a grim, determined smile. No, he's not. Now, let's go over exactly what you're going to say when he walks through that door. The 2 days waiting for Mark to return were the longest of my life. I felt like an actor rehearsing for a difficult role. I went through the motions of my daily life, but my mind was constantly churning, replaying David's instructions. My mother was a nervous wreck. She jumped every time the phone rang. She barely ate. I tried to reassure her, telling her we had a plan, but I couldn't give her the details. David had been clear. The fewer people who knew the full strategy, the better. My mother's inability to lie would be a liability if Mark grilled her. All she knew was that I had spoken to David and that he was helping us. Friday evening arrived. I heard his car pull into the driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. I took a deep breath and composed my face into a mask of worried confusion, just as I had practiced. My mother was wringing her hands in the kitchen, her eyes wide with fear. The front door opened and Mark breezed in, dropping his travel bag on the floor. "Honey, I'm home," he called out cheerfully. He walked into the kitchen and kissed my mother on the cheek. He glanced at me. "Hey, kiddo, why the long face?" This was it. Showtime. "Mark?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. I held up the foreclosure notice, which I had been clutching in my hand. "We got this in the mail. I don't understand what it is." He took the letter from me, his smile faltering as he read the headline. He feigned a look of shock, but I could see a flicker of something else in his eyes. Annoyance. He was annoyed that this had shown up while he was away. "What on earth?" he said, shaking his head. "This has to be a mistake, a bank error. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll get on the phone with them first thing in the morning and sort this out." "A mistake?" My mother chimed in, her voice thin and reedy. "Mark, it says they're going to take the house." "Now, Sarah, don't get hysterical," he said, patting her arm in that condescending way of his. "It's just a scare tactic. These banks are all crooks. They probably mixed up our account with someone else's. It's a simple clerical error." I decided to push a little, just as David and I had rehearsed. "But it says here there's a $200,000 loan," I said, my voice cracking. "I called them, Mark. They said I signed for it." His face hardened for a split second before the charming mask slipped back into place. "You called them? Ellie, you shouldn't have done that. You've probably just confused the situation. Look, your mother and I took out a very small loan a while back for some home improvements we were planning. The bank must have added a few extra zeros by mistake. It's no big deal. I'll handle it." "Home improvements?" I pressed, letting a tear roll down my cheek. "What home improvements? And why would my name be on it? It's my house." His patience was clearly wearing thin. The act was starting to fray at the edges. "Now listen here, you're getting yourself all worked up over nothing," he said, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "It's complicated financial stuff. You wouldn't understand. I am telling you that I will take care of it. You need to trust me." This was the moment David had warned me about. The moment he would try to shut me down and reassert his control. I had to let him think he had succeeded. I wiped my eyes and nodded meekly. "Okay, Mark. I'm sorry. I'm scared." "I know you are," he said, his tone softening again now that he thought he had won. "But you have nothing to be scared of. I'm here now. Everything is going to be fine." He gave my mother another kiss. "I'm going to go unpack. We'll talk about this more in the morning when everyone is calmer." He walked out of the room, leaving my mother and me standing in the kitchen. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. She had just seen, for the first time, the man she married lie so effortlessly to both of us. The charming facade had cracked, and she had caught a glimpse of the cold, calculating stranger underneath. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. The first act of our play was over, and Mark had performed exactly as we had predicted. The next morning, I got up early and went for a run, needing to clear my head. When I got back, I could hear Mark in the kitchen, on the phone. I lingered in the hallway out of sight and listened. "No, I'm telling you, it's under control," he was saying, his voice low and urgent. "They just got the letter. They're spooked, that's all." "Yes, of course I have a story." I told them it was a bank error. "Look, I just need you to be patient. A few more weeks, that's all. I'll have the rest of the money then. Don't call me here again. I'll call you." He hung up. My blood ran cold. Who was he talking to? The rest of the money? What did that mean? He had already stolen $200,000. Was there more? I retreated to my room and immediately texted David. He was on the phone. Said he needs a few more weeks to get the rest of the money. Told the person not to call him here. David's reply came a minute later. "Good work. He's getting sloppy. Chloe is already working on the bank transfer. This new piece is interesting. It suggests he's not done yet. Stay the course. Let him think you believe him." Later that day, I found Mark at the dining room table, surrounded by papers, pretending to be working on the problem. He had a look of theatrical concentration on his face. "Any luck?" I asked, trying to sound hopeful and naive. He looked up and gave me a reassuring smile. "It's exactly as I thought. A complete mess-up on the bank's end. They've mixed up our file with another property. It's going to take a few days to unravel their bureaucratic nonsense, but I'm on it. I spent all morning on the phone with them." It was such a blatant lie. I had been home all morning. He had made one short, secretive phone call, and that was it. But I just nodded. "Oh, good. I was so worried." "No need to worry," he said, patting my hand. "That's what I'm here for, to take care of you and your mother." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He was sitting in my father's chair in my father's house, telling me he would take care of me while actively planning our ruin. The urge to scream at him, to throw the copied loan documents in his face, was immense. But I held it back. I thought of David's words. Let him dig his own grave. The next week was a tense charade. Mark would provide daily updates on his supposed progress with the bank. "They're being very difficult," he'd say with a sigh. I had to escalate it to a supervisor. Or, "We're making progress, but the legal department has to review it." He was buying time. My mother, following my lead, played her part. She would thank him for working so hard on it, her voice strained. The air in the house was thick with unspoken truths. It was exhausting. Meanwhile, David and I were moving forward. He helped me officially file a police report for forgery and identity theft. As he had predicted, the officer who took the report was dismissive. "This sounds like a family dispute, miss," he said. "These things are usually better handled in civil court." David had already prepared for this. He filed a civil complaint against Mark for fraud, conversion, and unjust enrichment. This gave us the power to issue subpoenas. Our first subpoena went to Apex Digital Trust. We wanted the account records. We wanted to know whose name was on the account where my money had landed. A few days later, David called me. "We got a hit," he said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. Chloe got the records. The account at Apex Digital Trust was opened online a week before the HELOC was funded. It's in one name only. "Whose?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Mark Miller," David said. "His name, his social security number. No mention of your mother. He had the $200,000 wired directly into an account that he controlled completely." It was the confirmation we needed. The first solid link in the chain of his crime. He hadn't just tricked my mother into signing a paper. He had deliberately and methodically created a secret account to funnel the stolen money into. This was premeditated. "There's more," David said. "Chloe traced the outgoing transactions from that account. He didn't just let the money sit there. He started moving it immediately. A big chunk, $150,000, was wired out just 2 days after it came in. To where? I asked. A title company, David said. In a town called Oak Creek. It's about 2 hours from you. The wire transfer memo had a property address on it. My mind was racing. A title company? A property address? He bought something, I whispered. He bought a house. Looks that way, David confirmed. Chloe is running a property search on the address right now. We should know who the owner is by tomorrow. He didn't just steal your money, Ellie. He invested it. The audacity of it left me breathless. He had taken the equity from my father's home, a place of safety and memory, and used it to buy another property for himself. He was living a double life, funded by his crimes against us. The phone call I had overheard suddenly made a chilling new kind of sense. The rest of the money. He wasn't planning on stopping. He was probably planning to drain whatever equity was left in the house. The next day, David called again. His voice was different. It wasn't just angry anymore. It was filled with a sort of weary sadness. Ellie, are you sitting down? He asked. Just tell me, David, I said. Chloe got the deed from the Oak Creek property records, he said. The owner is Mark Miller. He's the sole owner. But that's not the worst part. What is it? Chloe did what she does best, David continued. She didn't just stop at the public records. She sent a local contact to the neighborhood to ask some questions, to see who was living at the address. He paused. Mark has another family, Ellie. The words didn't register at first. Another family? A girlfriend, a woman named Jessica. And they have a child together, a little boy, about 3 years old. They live in the house in Oak Creek. The neighbors know him as Mark Peterson. He's using a different last name. I sank into a chair, the phone pressed hard against my ear. It was too much to process. A secret girlfriend? A secret child. A whole secret life. The business trips weren't business trips. They were trips to his other life. The life he had built using my father's legacy as his foundation. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had betrayed my mother in the most complete and devastating way imaginable. He had made a mockery of their marriage, of her love, of the life they had supposedly built together. He was leaving her, I said, the realization dawning on me. That's what this was all about. He was going to drain this house of all its value and then disappear, leaving my mom with nothing but a foreclosure notice and a mountain of debt. It appears so, David said grimly. And he was going to use her signature on that loan document to scare you into silence. He was going to threaten to take her down with him. I remembered his words in the kitchen, the way his tone had sharpened. You're getting hysterical. It's complicated financial stuff you wouldn't understand. He wasn't just being condescending. He was actively laying the groundwork for his escape plan, painting me as an unreliable, emotional girl who couldn't be trusted. If I went to the police, who would they believe? The charming, responsible husband, or the hysterical daughter making wild accusations? He had planned for every contingency, but he hadn't planned for David. And he hadn't planned for Chloe. Chloe got pictures, David said, his voice pulling me back from the brink. She has photos of him with the girlfriend and the child, in the front yard of the new house. She has a signed statement from a neighbor. We have everything, Ellie. We have the money trail, the fraudulent documents, the motive and photographic proof of his entire secret life. We have him. The only question now is, what do you want to do with him? I thought about my mother. I thought about how this news would absolutely shatter her. But I also thought about what Mark had intended to do to her. To leave her homeless and heartbroken, taking the blame for his crimes. The cold anger that had been simmering inside me for days now solidified into something hard and sharp. This wasn't just about getting the money back anymore. This was about justice. Not just for me, but for my mother. I want to destroy him, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. I want to take everything from him, just like he was going to do to us. I want him to see it all fall apart. I was hoping you'd say that, David replied. I have an idea. It's dramatic. It's risky. But I think it's exactly what he deserves. The plan David laid out was bold. It was a high-stakes gamble, but it felt right. He said a quiet, private confrontation would allow Mark to lie, to manipulate, to control the narrative. We couldn't give him that opportunity. We needed to strip away his power, and his greatest power was his ability to present a charming, believable facade. We had to do this in front of witnesses. We had to expose him so completely that he would have no choice but to surrender. The key was my mother. She was still under his spell, even with her growing doubts. She was terrified of losing her husband, of her life falling apart. Simply telling her about Mark's secret family would be a brutal blow, and he could potentially twist it, claim the woman was a stalker, that the child wasn't his. We had to show her undeniable proof. We had to let her see the truth for herself, in a controlled environment where Mark couldn't intimidate her. I decided to invite my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, to be there. Carol was a no-nonsense woman. She had never been Mark's biggest fan, finding him too slick, but she had always been polite for my mother's sake. She was practical and level-headed. She would be a grounding presence for my mom when the truth came out. So I called my mom and my aunt and told them I wanted to have a family meeting to discuss the bank situation. I told them I had asked David to be there to explain the legal options. This was the truth, just not the whole truth. My mom was reluctant, scared of the confrontation, but she agreed. Aunt Carol, sensing the gravity in my voice, immediately said she would be there. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon. I spent Saturday preparing. I went to a copy shop and printed out enlargements of the photos Chloe had taken. The picture of Mark pushing his little boy on a swing. The picture of him kissing his girlfriend on the porch of their new house. I put them in a large manila envelope. I had another folder with copies of the forged loan document, the wire transfer to Mark's secret account, and the deed to the Oak Creek house. Everything was ready. On Sunday, David arrived first. He looked over the documents and the photos I had arranged on the coffee table, hidden for now under a stack of magazines. Are you ready for this, Ellie? He asked, his expression serious. I am, I said. I'm not scared of him anymore. Aunt Carol arrived next. She hugged me tightly. What is really going on, Eleanor? She asked in a low voice. Your mother is a mess, and you sound like you're going to war. Something like that, I said. Just trust me, Aunt Carol, and be there for Mom. She's going to need you. My mother was pacing in the kitchen, her hands fluttering nervously. She looked pale and fragile. I felt a pang of guilt for what I was about to put her through, but I knew it was necessary. It was like setting a broken bone. The process would be painful, but it was the only way she could truly heal. Then, Mark came downstairs. He had been working in his home office all morning. He was dressed in casual slacks and a polo shirt, the very picture of a relaxed suburban husband. He smiled when he saw everyone. Well, look at this, he said, his voice oozing false bonhomie. A full family summit. What's the occasion? He saw David and his smile tightened. And the lawyer is here? This seems a bit dramatic, don't you think, Ellie? I think it's exactly as dramatic as it needs to be, I said, my voice cold and even. I gestured to the sofa. Please sit down, Mark. He hesitated, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The scared, confused girl from a week ago was gone. He slowly sat down in an armchair across from the sofa where my mother and Aunt Carol were perched nervously. David stood near the fireplace, a silent, imposing figure. I remained standing. We're here to talk about the house, Mark, I began. I told you I'm handling it, he said dismissively. It's a clerical error. It's taking some time, but it will be resolved. We're not here to talk about the clerical error, I said. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Then I delivered the first blow. We're here to talk about your new house. The effect was instantaneous. The color drained from Mark's face. His charming demeanor vanished, replaced by a stony, guarded expression. He was a cornered animal. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice flat. My mother looked from me to Mark, her brow furrowed in confusion. "New house? Mark, what is she saying?" "She's lying," Mark snapped, his eyes fixed on me. "She's making things up to cause trouble. She's always been jealous of our marriage." I ignored him and turned to my mother. "I'm not lying, Mom." I reached under the magazines on the coffee table and pulled out the first folder. I opened it and laid the documents out, one by one. "This," I said, pointing to the first paper, "is the $200,000 loan application with my forged signature. And this," I pointed to the second, "is the record of the wire transfer. The money went from the loan account into a secret bank account opened by Mark, in his name only." My mother gasped. Aunt Carol leaned forward, her eyes narrowed, studying the papers. "And this," I said, placing the last document on the table, "is the deed to a house in Oak Creek, purchased 2 days after the money was stolen. The owner, Mark Miller." Mark shot to his feet. "This is insane. You faked these documents. Sarah, you can't believe this nonsense. It's a setup." "Sit down, Mark," David said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that made Mark flinch. He slowly sank back into his chair. "Mark, is this true?" My mother whispered, her voice trembling. Tears were streaming down her face. "Did you do this?" "No." "Sarah, baby, look at me," he pleaded, trying to use his old charm. "This is them trying to tear us apart. You know I would never do anything to hurt you. I love you." He was still lying. Even with the evidence laid out in front of him, he was still trying to manipulate her. He was counting on her love for him to be stronger than the truth. It was time to end it. "You love her?" I asked, my voice dripping with contempt. I picked up the second, larger envelope from the table. "Is that why you have a second family?" I pulled out the photographs, the 8-8-10 enlargements. I didn't hand them to him. I handed the first one to my mother. It was the photo of Mark, smiling broadly, pushing a small, dark-haired boy on a swing set. A beautiful, brand-new house was visible in the background. My mother stared at the picture. A sound escaped her throat, a strangled, guttural cry of pure, undiluted agony. It was a sound I will never forget. She dropped the photo as if it had burned her. Aunt Carol picked it up. Her face went pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. I then placed the second photo on the table, face up for everyone to see. It was Mark and another woman, pretty, younger than my mom, standing on the porch of the same house. His arm was around her, and he was leaning in to kiss her. They looked happy. They looked like a family. The room fell silent, except for my mother's ragged sobs. Mark sat frozen in his chair, his face a mask of gray horror. The game was over. There were no more lies to tell. There was no escape. He stared at the photograph of his other life, exposed and naked in the wreckage of this one. David finally broke the silence. He stepped forward, his expression grim. "Here's the situation, Mark," he said, his voice low and precise, like a surgeon making an incision. "You have 2 options, and I suggest you listen very carefully." Mark didn't look up. He just stared at the coffee table, at the evidence of his betrayal laid bare. "Option 1," David continued, "is that we take this entire file. The fraudulent loan documents, the proof of the secret bank account, the deed to your new house, these photographs, and the signed statement from your neighbor in Oak Creek, and we walk it into the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. You will be arrested and charged with multiple felonies: bank fraud, wire fraud, grand larceny, identity theft. Given the amount of money and the sophisticated nature of the crime, you will not get probation. You will go to prison for a very, very long time. The bank will still foreclose on this house. Your assets will be frozen, and your new life in Oak Creek will be over before it even really began. You will lose everything." He paused, letting the words sink in. My mother's sobs had subsided into quiet, shuddering breaths. Aunt Carol had her arm around her, glaring at Mark with pure, unadulterated hatred. Or, David said, there is option two. He slid another set of papers across the table. This is a full confession, written by me, detailing everything you did. You will sign it. This is a quitclaim deed. It transfers ownership of the house in Oak Creek to Eleanor, free and clear. You will sign it. These are divorce papers. You will agree to an immediate and uncontested divorce from Sarah, waiving any and all claims to any of her assets, or Eleanor's now and in the future. You will sign them. Mark finally lifted his head. His eyes were hollow. He looked at me, then at my mother. There was no remorse in his gaze, only the cold, dead look of a man who had been utterly defeated. In exchange for your full and immediate cooperation, David finished, Ellie will agree not to press personal criminal charges. We will present your confession to the bank's fraud department to halt the foreclosure, framing this as a domestic dispute that has been resolved internally. The bank may still choose to pursue their own charges against you for defrauding them, but your confession and cooperation will be your best and only chance at convincing them not to. You will walk out of this house today with nothing but what you can carry in one bag, and you will never, ever contact Ellie or Sarah again. What's it going to be, Mark? It wasn't a choice. It was a surrender. He knew it. We all knew it. He had spent a year building a secret escape route for himself, and in the space of 10 minutes, we had turned it into a cage. He looked at my mother one last time, perhaps hoping for a flicker of pity, a shred of the love she once had for him. But her face was like stone. Her heart, which he had so casually broken, was now closed to him forever. He slowly reached for the pen that David had placed on the table. I'll sign, he whispered, his voice raspy. The fight was gone. The charm, the arrogance, the condescension, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a small, pathetic man. He had thought he was a mastermind, a player in a game only he understood. But he was just a common thief, and he had just lost everything. The signing was a quiet, somber affair. David had, with incredible foresight, arranged for a mobile notary to be waiting just down the street. He made a quick call, and a woman appeared at the door a few minutes later. She efficiently witnessed and stamped each signature, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the raw emotion in the room. Mark signed the confession, his hand shaking. He signed the quitclaim deed, surrendering the house he had bought with my stolen money. He signed the divorce papers, legally severing himself from our lives. When it was all done, the notary packed up her things and left. Mark just sat there for a moment, staring at the pile of signed documents that represented the complete demolition of his life. Get out, I said. My voice was quiet but held the force of a command. He didn't look at me. He stood up slowly, like an old man, and walked upstairs. My mother didn't watch him go. She just stared at the wall, her expression blank. Aunt Carol held her hand, a silent pillar of support. David gathered up the signed papers, placing them carefully into his briefcase. He had won. We had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the aftermath of a natural disaster. A few minutes later, Mark came back down the stairs. He was carrying the same travel bag he had arrived with on Friday. His face was gray and empty. He walked to the front door without looking at any of us. He opened it, stepped outside, and closed it quietly behind him. And just like that, he was gone. The destructive force that had torn through our lives had finally passed. We were left to survey the damage. The week that followed was a blur of legal and financial activity. David was a machine. On Monday morning, he filed the signed divorce papers with the court. He filed the quitclaim deed with the county recorder's office in Oak Creek. The house Mark had bought was now legally mine. He then contacted the fraud department at the bank. He sent them a copy of Mark's signed confession, explaining that the family dispute had been resolved, the perpetrator had admitted guilt, and that I, the property owner, would be making the bank whole. The bank, faced with a signed confession and a clear path to getting their money back without a costly legal battle, was surprisingly cooperative. They immediately froze the foreclosure proceedings, pending the repayment of the HELOC. The threat of losing my home was gone. A wave of relief so profound washed over me that I felt weak. My next step was to deal with the house in Oak Creek. David connected me with a real estate agent in the area. I explained the situation to her in blunt terms. I had acquired a property I did not want, and I needed to sell it as quickly as possible. I authorized her to list it for a competitive price to ensure a fast sale. Then came the hardest part. I had to go to the house. The agent needed me to sign some listing paperwork in person, and we needed to assess the property. I dreaded it. I didn't want to set foot in the life Mark had built with my money. David offered to come with me, but I knew I had to do this myself. It was the final chapter of this nightmare, and I had to be the one to close the book. The drive to Oak Creek was 2 hours of quiet dread. The town was pleasant, with tree-lined streets and well-kept houses. It was the kind of place people moved to raise a family. The kind of place Mark wanted for his other life. I found the address and pulled up across the street. It was a brand new construction, a nice 2-story house with a small, neat yard. There was a swing set in the backyard, the one from the photograph. Seeing it in person made me feel sick. I took a deep breath and walked up to the front door. The real estate agent, a brisk and efficient woman named Brenda, was already there. She gave me a sympathetic look. "Ready to do this?" she asked. I nodded. She unlocked the door and we stepped inside. The house was furnished. Not lavishly, but comfortably. It was clear people had been living here. There were toys in the corner of the living room. A child's drawing was taped to the refrigerator. On the mantelpiece, there was a framed photo. It was of Mark, his girlfriend Jessica, and their son. They were all smiling. The previous occupants left in a hurry," Brenda said delicately. "They took their personal belongings, but left most of the furniture." So Jessica and the boy were gone. Mark must have called them after he left my house, told them the game was up. I wondered what lies he had told her. Did she know the money was stolen? Or was she just another victim of his charm and his deceit? I found I didn't have the energy to care. They were his problem, not mine. I walked through the empty rooms, a ghost in someone else's life. This house was the physical manifestation of his betrayal. Every wall, every window was purchased with a piece of my family's security. It felt tainted. I signed the paperwork with Brenda, gave her the keys, and walked out without looking back. I never wanted to see the place again. The house sold in less than a month. The market was good, and it was priced to move. After the real estate commissions and closing costs were paid, the proceeds were wired directly to the bank to pay off the fraudulent $200,000 HELOC. The transaction was complete. The loan was gone. The title to my father's house was clean again, fully and completely mine, just as he had intended. There was even a small amount of money left over from the sale, about $15,000. I opened a new bank account in my mother's name only and deposited it there. It wasn't a fortune, but it was hers. It was a start. With the financial crisis averted, the emotional fallout began. My mother was a ghost of herself. She drifted through the house, her eyes vacant. She had lost her husband, her marriage, and her trust in her own judgment all at once. The betrayal had hollowed her out. For the first few weeks, our relationship was strained. She couldn't look at me without seeing the wreckage of her life. I think a part of her, unfairly, blamed me for being the one to expose it all. Aunt Carol was a lifesaver. She came over every day. She made my mother eat. She took her for walks. She let her cry and rage and talk for hours. Slowly, very slowly, my mother began to emerge from the fog. She started going to therapy, a step I never thought she would take. One evening, about 2 months after Mark had left, I came home from work to find my mom sitting at the kitchen table, looking at an old photo album. It was filled with pictures of her and my dad. She looked up at me as I came in. Her eyes were clear for the first time in weeks. "I am so sorry, Ellie," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Mom. I told her. He fooled you. He fooled us. No, she said, shaking her head. I need to say this. I'm sorry for not listening to you. I'm sorry for not seeing what was right in front of me. I let him into our lives. I let him into your father's house. And I'm sorry for being angry at you. It was easier to be angry at you than to face what he did. Tears welled up in my eyes. I know, Mom. You saved me, she said. You saved this house. You saved everything. You were so strong. You were just like your father. She looked down at a picture of my dad, a faint smile on her face. He would be so, so proud of you. We sat there together for a long time, looking through the old photos, remembering a time before Mark, a time of safety and love. It felt like we were reclaiming our own history. Life settled into a new normal. The house was quiet. At first, the silence was unsettling, a constant reminder of the chaos that had transpired. But gradually, it became peaceful. It was our space again. We could breathe. My mom started gardening, filling the yard with bright flowers. She started cooking again, trying out new recipes. The light came back into her eyes. Our relationship, once strained by the secrets and lies, became stronger than ever before. We were survivors, a team of two. I saw David for lunch every few months. He always asked how my mom was doing. During one of our lunches, I asked him a question that had been lingering in the back of my mind. What do you think happened to him? I asked. To Mark. David took a sip of his coffee. Hard to say for sure. Without money or assets, he's got nothing. His name is mud at any reputable financial institution. The confession we have would make it impossible for him to get a real loan again. My guess? He's probably working some low-level cash job trying to pull himself back up. Or more likely, he's found some other woman to leech off of. Men like him don't change. They just find new victims. And the bank? I asked. They never pressed charges? No, David said. They got their money back. For them, it was a business decision. Pursuing a criminal case would have been time-consuming and expensive with no financial upside. Your confession from him was the perfect out for them. They closed the file. I felt a pang of disappointment. A part of me still wanted to see him face a judge. To see him in a prison uniform. David seemed to read my mind. Justice isn't always about a courtroom, Ellie, he said gently. You took everything from him. You took his money. You took the house he thought was his new kingdom. You exposed him for the fraud he is. He can't show his face in this town again. You forced him into a humiliating exile. Believe me, for a man with an ego like his, that is a punishment far worse than prison. You didn't just beat him. You erased him. He was right. I had wanted to destroy him. And I had. I had taken away his power, his money, and his carefully constructed image. I had left him with nothing. One evening, months later, my mom and I were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. The garden was in full bloom. The air was warm and smelled of roses. It was peaceful. You know, my mom said, her voice thoughtful. For a long time, I felt so foolish, so weak for letting him trick me. You weren't weak, Mom, I said. You were trusting. There's a difference. Maybe, she said. But what I've realized is that he didn't win. He thought he could take this house, take Dad's money, and just walk away. But he couldn't. She looked around at the yard, at the house standing strong and solid behind us. Your father protected us, even after he was gone. He left you this house. He left us that fund for repairs. He left you a friend like David. It was all a safety net. A legacy. I had never thought of it that way. I had seen the house as a gift, a memory. But she was right. It was a fortress. My father, in his quiet, steadfast way, had built a fortress around us to protect us from a world that could be cruel and predatory. Mark had tried to breach the walls, but he had failed. He thought he was stealing a piece of property. He thought he was liquidating an asset. He never understood that he was messing with something far more powerful. He was messing with a father's love for his family. He was messing with a legacy. And in the end, the legacy won. I was no longer the scared girl waiting for someone to fix things. I had learned to fight for what was mine. I had learned to protect my own. And Mark, wherever he was, had finally learned what it feels like to be small, powerless, and to have absolutely nothing. He had learned what it felt like to be erased. And that was a justice I could live with.